Her name is Ifemelu. She leaves Nigeria to come to the US to go to college, and she goes through many experiences. It's very hard to summarize. I think one of the things I wanted to do with Americanah was to write about leaving home, write about immigration, but not in the way that I think is familiar in general for the continent of Africa. I think immigrants from Africa are often thought about as people fleeing all kinds of peril, war, poverty, but that's not the immigration that I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with the kind of immigration that is really about people seeking more choices. So they're not starving, they're welfare, they have jobs, but they want more. And I think that's what has propelled a lot of the immigration in our history as human beings. And I sometimes feel that Africa as a continent isn't really allowed that. So Ifemelu isn't dying, there isn't a war, but she wants more. There's kind of that longing for sort of wanting to escape the familiar. And she comes to the US, and one of the things that she discovers is identity. She discovers that she's black. She hasn't thought of herself as black in Nigeria because she hasn't had any need to, because most people in Nigeria
it's majority black,
are black.
So everybody there is.
So identity in Nigeria, which is also quite fraught, is sort of religion, it's ethnicity, but not race. And in the US, she discovers that she's black, and it becomes for her a kind of, I like to think of it as an awakening, but also it gives her a subject to write a very funny, acerbic blog about race in America and about what it means, and it's sort of her reflections on blackness as a non-American black.
I want people to know that you have a personal stake in some of this conversation about migrants and movement and immigration. Your parents were displaced and lived as refugees for 3 years, is that right? Would you tell us the story?
Well, my parents went through the Nigerian-Biafran War, 1967 to 1970. So they had to flee their home in southeastern Nigeria, which was in Biafra, because the Nigerian army was advancing. And so they lived in different towns as refugees for the 3 years of the war, and then at the end of the war, they were able to go back home. But their experience and just their talking about it kind of has made me, I'm going to say empathetic, but that's not it, but it's just made me care about the subject of refugees. And it's also made me question the way that we talk about refugees.
In what way?
The way that I think that it can often be dehumanizing to think of refugees as just refugees, because people are complex beings. So when I think about my parents in the 3 years that they were refugees, but that's not all they were. They were also thoughtful, educated, kind people who had dreams and hopes. And I think that sometimes in the debate about refugees, we forget that. And I think it shapes the way we think and talk about it.
What role do you see for a writer telling a story like that in terms of shaping the narrative as we understand it, but also, I introduced you as a storyteller. Stories have a tremendous power to give people dignity. Yes.
I think the role of a storyteller in subjects of this sort is to humanize, is to remind us that people are first human beings before anything else, before being immigrants, before being refugees, before they're human. And I think it's important. It's not just because we should do it to feel good about ourselves, but also it's actually quite practical. I think if we think about the humanity of these people, then it shapes the way we formulate policy, it shapes the way we solve problems, it shapes the way we understand things. If we think about people who want to come to this country, for example, just as immigrants, without knowing what are their dreams, what are their motivations, and also on the other side, what hurts their dignity, what wounds their pride, those things matter.